Okay, well, the world-famous Bigfoot may have been spotted traveling across I-80 earlier this week. Researchers with the Bigfoot Field Research Organization wrote a report on the incident. Okay, Mark, so according to the witness in the report, the alleged Sasquatch crossed the busy highway around 5:30 on October 4th, about 11 miles northeast of Bellefonte, near Bald Eagle State Park. The witness claims the dark figure was human-like, taller than the vehicle in front of him, and seemed to almost glide across the lanes and run into the woods, all in about 3 seconds. That's pretty fast. 2 others reported seeing something that day as well. One says he's an avid hunter who said even with 50-plus years in the woods, he doesn't know what he saw, but it wasn't a bear. So, Mark, after that, do you believe?
I'm kind of scared to head out to I-80. I travel that road a lot in that very area, sometimes early in the morning.
Yeah, I mean, maybe one of these days you'll see Bigfoot just running across the road. And that's a pretty dangerous road to cross, too.
Yeah, no thank you. I don't need that excitement.
I knew that one more step and he would be out in the open and I would have full view of him. And he took that last step and it was as if he stepped behind an invisible curtain. He just wasn't there anymore.
For 3 days, a man with 10 years in the wild pointed his camera into the dark and recorded something he could not name. Then nobody saw him again. Searchers found his campsite soaked in blood. His bones snapped, his loaded gun never fired. And on his truck, handprints far larger than his own, pressed into the metal by something he never saw. The man who chose the trees. Jordan Grider was 29 years old, and what mattered most about him was simple. He was not lost. For more than a decade, Jordan had lived outside. Not weekend camping, not summer hikes. He lived in the wilderness as a deliberate way of life. He had survived full seasons in Kentucky. He had moved through the forests of upstate New York. He read rivers and trails and deep timber the way most people read the street signs in their own neighborhood. When people called him homeless, he corrected them every time. He was not homeless. He had simply chosen to keep his home outside, under the trees, away from walls. In late September of 2018, Jordan came back to northern New Mexico to see his father and his 5 brothers. He stayed a few weeks. He ate dinner at the family table. He laughed, he said his goodbyes, and then he told them he was heading somewhere incredible, a great camping spot, and that he would be gone a few months. Nobody worried. This was Jordan. This was simply what Jordan did. None of them knew that the place he had chosen would be the last place anyone would ever hear from him. The last photograph. In late October of 2018, Jordan drove his pickup north into Minnesota. His destination was the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness, over 1 million acres of ancient forest, frozen lakes, and rivers that seemed to vanish into nothing. It is one of the most remote stretches of country left in the entire United States. He parked at a trailhead and walked in about 1.5 miles, deep into the trees, far from anyone. He set up camp. He sent photos home. He told his family roughly where he was. He seemed fine. On one of those early October mornings, he sent a single photograph. A beaver pond, still water, thin light coming through the trees. His family glanced at it and thought nothing of it. Just another check-in from a man who had done this 100 times before. One night, he drove into the nearest town for supplies. A receipt found later among his belongings confirmed it. It was ordinary. It was routine. He was stocking up, settling in, getting ready for the deep winter ahead. And then the check-in stopped. A day passed, then another, then a week, then 2, a month. The silence grew heavier with every day that no message came. At some point, a Forest Service agent on a routine patrol noticed Jordan's truck parked in front of a gated road, blocking access to a private cabin area. No person nearby, no note, no explanation. The agent had the truck towed to a parking lot, suspecting nothing, just following procedure. That towed truck would become one of the first pieces of a puzzle no one has ever managed to finish. Blood and no body. Weeks stretched into months. Investigators had almost nothing to work with. One photograph of a beaver pond. A small team used it as a reference point and pushed into the wilderness to search, and they found nothing. No trace, no campsite, no gear. Then, in early April of 2019, almost 6 months after Jordan was last heard from, searchers finally located the camp. What they saw stopped them cold. The site sat on a south-facing slope, chosen by someone who knew exactly what he was doing. Nothing about it was rushed or sloppy. A tarp was strung between two trees. A hammock hung beneath it. This was not a desperate man improvising in a panic. This was an outdoorsman who had lived this way for 10 years. But the closer they looked, the less sense the scene made. Blood. Enormous amounts of dried blood. On the hammock, soaked into the sleeping bag, splattered across the inside of the tarp shelter. The ground beneath was saturated, and yet there was no body, no Jordan, nothing. Then they found the gun. Jordan's 9mm handgun was still at the scene, still loaded, still chambered. Not a single round had been fired. The meaning of that is hard to overstate. A man with over 10 years of wilderness survival behind him. A man who had slept alone in deep forest for a decade. A man who was armed and who never fired his weapon. Whatever happened to Jordan happened before he could even reach for it. What unsettled the people who worked that scene most was what was missing from it. The shelter itself was undisturbed. The tarp still hung where Jordan had tied it. The hammock still held its shape. For all the blood, there was no sign of a fight, no overturned gear, no dragged earth leading away into the trees. It was as if the violence and the silence had arrived in the same instant, and then everything had simply gone still. Because the snow was still several feet deep in April, investigators could not run a full search. They documented what they could and came back. 3 weeks later, with the snow melting, the teams returned in force. 20, sometimes 30 people at a time, running grid walks through the timber. Cadaver dogs worked the tree lines. What they recovered were 12 bones scattered near the camp. Vertebrae, what looked like a femur, a possible forearm bone, several ribs, fragments too small to identify on sight. 2 more bones turned up farther out during later sweeps. They found his phone, his socks, a shredded jacket. Torn clothing spread across the area. They never found his skull. Teams searched and came back empty. The skull simply was not there. If it was somewhere in that forest, then something had carried it to a place no search team was ever willing to follow. In August of 2020, forensic testing confirmed through DNA that the bones were Jordan's. The case was resolved the only way the paperwork could resolve it. Identity confirmed. Cause of death listed as unknown. No foul play suspected. Case closed. His mother refused to accept it. She believed wolves had taken him in his sleep on one of those first brutal winter nights. She knew her son. He would not have gone quietly, but investigators pushed back hard on the wolf theory. Fatal wolf attacks on humans in North America are almost unheard of. Only 2 confirmed across the entire continent in the previous 20 years. And even in Minnesota, where wolves are more common than nearly anywhere else in the lower 48, an attack like that would be extraordinary. If a pack had pulled a man out of a hammock, the scene would have shown it. Shredded equipment, a torn-apart hammock, defensive marks on the bones. There was none of that. The hammock was intact. The scene was simply still. Blood and silence. His family raised another possibility. Jordan sometimes shaved with a straight razor. Perhaps he had cut an artery by accident and bled out before help could come. But there was no exposed blade at the camp. Every knife was sheathed. That theory did not hold either. Cases like this one, the ones the official reports quietly close, reach the people who have spent time in country like this only when the channel grows. A subscribe is what carries the next one forward. The things he filmed. Years after the case was closed, someone went back through the footage Jordan had recorded in his final days. He had uploaded 2 videos before he disappeared, and together they are the closest thing to a witness the wilderness ever gave up. The first opens on nothing a person can see. Black Minnesota forest, deep autumn, the cold already settled into the ground after dark. The phone's small light reaches a few feet and then surrenders to a dark that runs back for miles. The trees stand close. The water somewhere beyond them is going still under the first hard frosts. And somewhere in that dark, there is a sound. Low, drawn out. Almost a growl, but not the growl of any bear or wolf or cat that belongs in those woods. Something closer to a vocalization, lower than a voice, carrying through the cold in a way that does not fit anything that should be standing in that forest at that hour. It is not quite like anything anyone has been able to confidently name. Jordan turns the camera toward it, holding the light out into the trees, trying to find the shape that is making it. The shape does not come. Whatever is out there stays exactly where the light cannot reach, and it does not move on. That is the detail that should stop everyone cold. Jordan had spent 10 years learning the night sounds of a forest. He knew the difference between an elk shifting through brush and a branch giving way under frost. He had heard every ordinary thing a forest does after dark, 1,000 times over, and none of it had ever moved him to lift a camera. This did. An experienced man, alone, reaching for his phone in the dark to record a sound he could not place. In the second video, he is inside his tent, the thin fabric the only wall between him and the trees, recording himself listening. The sound returns, and then he says the thing he had never told his family directly. There were handprints on his truck, huge handprints. Prints that did not belong to him and did not belong to anyone he knew. Whatever had been making that sound at the edge of the light had walked up to his vehicle in the dark, laid its hands flat against it, and left without ever showing itself. He recorded all of it. He sat in a tent in the middle of 1,000,000 acres of forest, listened to something move just beyond the reach of his light, and described the marks it had left on his truck to a camera instead of to the people who loved him. Then the videos stop, and so does he. What the forest kept. The pattern does not end in Minnesota. 1,500 miles away, in a completely different forest, the same shape of disappearance had already taken 2 men, and it makes Jordan's case look almost simple. Deep in Washington state sits the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest, nearly 1,000,000 acres of dense Pacific Northwest wilderness, ancient trees, volcanic rock, lava beds left by eruptions that predate recorded human history. It is beautiful, dramatic country. It is also one of the strangest stretches of wilderness in the country when it comes to people who walk in and never walk out. On September 28th of 2013, 2 experienced cavers, Christopher and his friend Caleb, went to explore the lava bed formations deep inside the forest. Both had years behind them descending into the earth, navigating cave systems, reading hard volcanic terrain. Around 2 in the afternoon, the pair split up to cover more ground, each man taking a different opening. For 2 men who knew that ground, it seemed reasonable enough. Then Caleb turned around, and Christopher was simply gone. Not ahead, not behind, not answering when Caleb called his name. Caleb searched for hours through that brutal volcanic terrain, calling, looking, and found nothing. Eventually, he had no choice but to hike out and contact the authorities. The Skamania County Sheriff's Office launched a search immediately. The detective leading it described the terrain as a needle in a haystack, and he was not exaggerating. Caves that dead end without warning, lava tubes that drop into darkness, rock that holds no footprint at all. They searched for days. Days became a week, and then they had to accept it. Christopher had vanished from a wilderness he was experienced enough to handle. No clothing, no footprint, no sign of what had taken him. The search was called off. Christopher was gone. The man who left everything behind. A few years later, the same forest took someone else. John Hopkins was 69, a lifelong outdoorsman from Seattle who had been hiking for decades. When he parked at a trailhead lot and walked in, nobody was alarmed. He had done this his whole life. He never came back out. When his family grew worried and called for help, investigators found his car right where he had left it. But something was wrong immediately. All of John's equipment was still inside the vehicle. His gear, his supplies, everything he would have needed to actually survive out there was sitting in the car. He had walked into that forest carrying almost nothing. The search was exhaustive. Every accessible trail, every slope, every clearing. And like the search for Christopher years earlier, it produced nothing. Not a footprint, not a scrap of clothing, not one clue. As winter closed in and the temperatures dropped to dangerous levels, the search had to be suspended. The snow came and buried whatever the forest was keeping. For years, both men simply did not exist in any findable sense. Their families waited, their files stayed open, and the Gifford-Pinchot stayed quiet until it did not. Found within days. In 2023, 2 hunters came across something they never expected. Personal items belonging to John Hopkins, not near where he was last seen. About 1.5 miles northeast of that lot, deep in a section of forest that had already been searched. The items were just sitting there, as if placed, as if left behind on purpose, in a spot that should have been found years before. How those belongings ended up so far from where he was last seen, no one could say. Whether he had gone deeper than anyone realized or had been moving away from something, the forest gave no answer. In September of 2024, the sheriff's office mounted another full search, determined to finally give the family some closure. This time, the forest gave something up. They found human remains and DNA, confirmed they belonged to John Hopkins. After all those years, he had been found. But the discovery explained almost nothing. Not how he died, not what happened to him, not why he had been impossible to find for so long. What came next changed the shape of both cases. Just days after John's remains were recovered, a hiker moving through the same lava bed zone found a human skull lying on the ground. He marked the spot and called it in. A deputy came out, collected the skull, and swept the immediate area, finding nothing else that day. But the hiker could not shake the sense that something about the scene was wrong, and he asked the deputy to return the following day. This time, the forest cooperated. They found more remains, multiple pieces. The deputy collected everything and sent it for analysis. The results came back. The remains belonged to Christopher, the caver who had vanished in 2013, found at last in 2024, 11 years later, in the same stretch of forest where John Hopkins had turned up just days before. Two missing men, different years, different circumstances. Their remains surfacing within days of each other in the same patch of trees. What the bones don't explain. The details that followed were the ones investigators could not easily explain away. No bite marks were found on any of the recovered bones in the Washington cases. If animals had scavenged or scattered those remains, there would be evidence. Gnaw marks, tooth impressions. The biological signature medical examiners are trained to spot on site. There was none. The bones appeared to have been moved and distributed by something that left no animal trace behind. In Minnesota, the femur had been snapped, not fractured the way a fall fractures bone, snapped. That distinction matters because it points to applied force, not impact, not scavenging. In all three cases, the remains were spread across a wider area than a simple fall or collapse would produce. In all three cases, the men were genuinely experienced, not confused tourists, not people who wandered off a marked trail with no preparation. The Washington timeline is stranger still. Two men lost 11 years apart in roughly the same volcanic terrain. One surfaces first, his belongings already carried more than a mile from where he was last seen, dropped in ground that had been searched before. Then, within days of recovering him, a hiker finds the other man's skull lying on open ground. Two separate searches across two separate decades had turned up nothing. And then the forest surrendered both men almost at the same moment. The boundary waters in the Gifford Pinchot are separated by roughly 1,500 miles. Different ecosystems, different elevations, different wildlife, different terrain entirely. They are connected by exactly one thing. Men who knew how to survive went in, and pieces of them came back out, scattered in ways that no predator and no clean accident fully accounts for. 3 files. 3 families still without real answers. 3 investigations that all reach the same quiet conclusion. Cause of death, unknown. Cause of death, undetermined. The forest is not looking anymore, and neither is anyone else. None of this is proof of anything, and it would be wrong to pretend otherwise. The records list these deaths as unexplained, not as anything else, and nobody has ever shown what moved those bones. But that is exactly what keeps the cases from staying closed. The skull that was never recovered in Minnesota. The remains scattered without a single bite mark. The bone that was snapped instead of gnawed. The loaded gun that was never fired by a man who knew better than anyone how to use it. The handprints on the truck, too large to belong to anyone he knew. Cases like these reach the families still waiting, and the people who still walk that country only when the channel grows. A subscribe carries the next one forward. The last clear record of Jordan Grider is not a body, and it is not a grave. It is a few minutes of video. A man alone in a tent, holding a small light against a dark he could not see into, turning his camera toward a sound that never answered and never showed itself. Whatever he was filming in those final days had already walked up to his truck and laid its hands against the metal. Soon after, it took him so completely that the forest gave back only scattered bone and never the skull. The footage is still out there. So is whatever he was pointing the camera at.